Hi guys, welcome to Signal Path. Today we are rounding out the trilogy with the Strymon Mobius and 5 sounds that I'm betting you haven't used. The Strymon Mobius is a long-standing and I would say forerunner of the kind of now ubiquitous form factor of this 3-button multi-effect kind of MIDI-capable stereo pedal. It really was something that I feel broke ground in a lot of really useful ways. But today we're going to be talking about how it was kind of a forerunner in terms of modulation pedals. And there are 5 kind of areas of sound. I wouldn't even call them sounds as much at this point as approaches that I think are in many ways unique to the Mobius, but also just really, really kind of fun processes to work through. We're going to talk through mostly the weirder edge of things, the Mobius being one of the first entries that I was aware of in the modulation area, doing the lo-fi kind of crushed sound in a pretty way. So we're going to talk about Destroyer, we're going to talk about Quadrature, we're going to go through a few other kind of phasey, flangey sounds that I really enjoy for ambient music and ambient guitar, and with an emphasis on subtlety. I think where the Timeline and Bigsky videos were very much how do we create dramatic sounds. The Mobius is something that does subtlety really, really well, and I've really enjoyed the nuance of what's possible in here. So we're going to go through 5 sounds and maybe a couple rabbit trails here and there. Let's jump into it. But before we do that, if this is the kind of content you enjoy, it would mean a ton to me if you'd go ahead and like this video to let YouTube know to recommend this style of content in the future, and subscribe to the channel to follow along. Let's jump into it. All right, let's take a look at the Mobius. I'm playing my Balaguer Ambient Espada Select into the Cali 76 Stacked Edition Lightspeed Overdrive, and we're using the Strifecta today because you gotta. Let's run into the Dream and Ruby from UA. Sounds like this. We're going to start out with Quadrature because I think this is one of the most unsung modes of the Mobius, and I think as time has gone on, people have forgotten just how cool and insanely exciting Quadrature can be. And really, it's less about a specific mode or setting, and really more about, I think, a specific wave shape, which is kind of the ramping modes. Our bass sound kind of sounds like this. That reverb for a moment. So what's happening here? Basically, what we have this currently set to is the AM mode. And we're going to go through all of the modes because what I want to show is that it's actually less the specifics of the mode that we're using and a little bit more about the idea of how we're using it. But we'll keep it on AM for the moment. Shift is maxed out. We want kind of the maximal effect there. And then wave shape is set to ramp. That's how you're getting that kind of like always rising feel. Mix kind of set, somewhere in the middle. I would say more dry. If we were to go all the way wet, it would sound like this. Kind of a lot, but we do want, some prominence there. Now if I kick on a delay from the timeline, we dry this up just a little bit more to make it a bit more subtle. You kind of get this like cool synthetic and if you robe that with a little bit more reverb, it creates like almost this like siren-y feel in the background. really, really love, but to kind of show what I'm talking about how mode matters less than you might think. Let's flip it over to FM. Does a very similar thing, a little bit more bright and I would say like destructive in the overall sound. Frequency shift up. Kind of almost needs a little bit more mix on this particular mode. We're going to bring that up a little bit. A little bit more subtle on the frequency shift kind of side of things. And then frequency shift down is our last mode for Quadrature. So they all kind of do that like kind of fun riser thing. And genuinely, I don't actually think the mode you choose syncs to this idea or makes it float. It's really the wave shape. And what I mean when I say that is having the always rising effect does a lot to add energy, add a little bit of like brightness to things. There's something about a rising tone that really, I would say, musically gels better than something descending. So if we go, to the saw, which is basically the exact opposite. When the saw repeats and it's out of rhythm, it feels droopy. It feels a little bit like it's pulling away from the sonics that I'm looking for from it. You may really like that, and that's great. Compositionally, though, I find when the ramp resets, it feels less jarring to me. And so without it, it feels like a great way to add kind of like this sort of tinge of energy and kind of interest if we bring the mix way down and bring this back in. Feels like the ending of like an action movie from like 2006. But the wave shape is really what I think makes this sound really easy to use musically or really, really difficult. Like if we were going to go to sine wave. The constant ramping and the regularity of it make it something that is not unpleasant, but definitely a little bit more declarative. I feel like you can tuck the ramp into the background of things a little bit better than something that's going up and down. I find that up adds energy, down sort of feels like out of tune at certain points. And so, square gives you that kind of sample hold feel, and then random. It's a little bit too static for me. And then envelope. For the parts that I like to use this for, a little bit too gentle to get great use out of envelope. And so really, I think the point that I think I wanted to make with this sound is something about kind of resetting ramping, adding, we'll turn off the reverb for a second, turn on the delay. Something about really intense like ring mod or quadrature sounds. Always ramping up gives you this sort of blurry illusion of continuation that I really, really like, where up and down can be a little bit too regular, but mess with it. Let me know what you think, because I think this is really honestly one of the coolest sounds that's tucked in the Mobius, and in some ways, I think for me, worth the cost of admission. mess around with it. Let me know what you come up with. Our second sound is going to be the filter mode. Basically, we have set to take this sound and turn it into a kind of reverse synth swell. So to build this, what we've got to do is go to our mode, make sure we're in low pass. So we're getting kind of that nice closed filter sound. Wave shape, we're going to go to envelope minus, which is basically going to read our dynamics and close the filter the louder we play. And that's going to basically, as we let the chord ring out, swell things back in. We want a healthy amount of resonance here. I think, you know, the bigger, the more kind of synthy it'll feel. And we want to make sure that the dry level is off. But then we kind of stack some big reverb and some delay behind it. Kind of gives you this like fun pluck, but then a little bit more kind of a let off, and you can kind of change our overall feel here with our depth. Without the delay and reverb. Kind of does some fun things with like legato licks. It evolves over time, but really I think what it's most useful for is with some reverb. Kind of like auto swell, but in a totally different direction and overall vibe. Pretty fun. Now, the Rotary is an effect that I feel like a lot of people have bypassed over the years in the Mobius. Because they're not playing... They're not playing like organ stuff. But I actually think that if you like modulation in your ambient sounds, that the Rotary is one of the coolest kind of ways to create a lot of easy movement. Because not everything has to be this level of going for it in terms of kind of our fast setting. You know, if we slow this down quite a bit, it's reminiscent of a phaser. And so you can kind of go from, you know, some very, very cool slow settings where it's like almost non-existent, and then use our tap switch to kind of accelerate into something that is a little bit faster. And so if we kind of ramp this up here. And so if we build kind of an ambient tone around this parked sound, if we really drag this acceleration out, very, very kind of still and placid. Just kind of gives this like sort of like speechless melancholia to the sound. So kind of one of those things that, like, if you don't have an expression pedal but you like the idea of kind of ramping through modulation, even with full wet reverbs, you can kind of hear this difference here. Kind of adds energy, and the high speed calms down a little bit in the low speed. It also just kind of creates this nice, pretty scatter too. This is just the Mobius and the Timeline. Kind of feels like almost reverberant in what it's playing. Really, really nice. If you are a longtime fan, this one's maybe not for you. This is not going to be the most novel, but I think it is worth revisiting because the Destroyer mode in the Mobius is one of my absolute favorite bit-crushing lo-fi sounds overall. And if you're someone who's never messed with those kinds of modulation approaches, this is kind of my plea to try it out. Because this thing, in my mind, is instant ambient. Starting really subtly, we can add these kind of like slightly wrong fluctuations. Where it's starting to get a little bit more lo-fi, a little bit weirder. Super simple sound, but when I watch what happens when I turn a reverb on, it sounds like this without it. Bring this in. Starting to be a little bit like hazy noise and some kind of weirdness. And so I'm going to walk through how I think about dialing in Destroyer, because everyone kind of has their own starting edge and aesthetic for what it can do. But we can get super, super broken, and kind of what I like from sample rate. I love the warmth that it can provide, the rattling edges of your tone. That feels really, really nice. Like, it feels still discernible and kind of intelligible, but a little bit more kind of warm and crushed. as we bring down the bits. It can kind of get downright rotten if we want it to, but I actually find that higher bit depths feel a little bit better. Let's leave it there for the moment. I generally leave filter off, but there are some cool sounds available there, but I want to keep it a little bit more open. And let's drop the mix just a bit. If we roll the tone down slightly on the guitar, bring back our depth just a bit. Really slow it down. What we had before. It adds this like really incredible saturation and kind of warmth and depth. We bring the sample rate up to full. So one thing that can really be said about Destroyer is that it does even the subtle really well. It's definitely something that's a bit more declarative. But like just as a sweetener, this feels so good to me. Without it, and then back on. If it ever feels like too seasick, you can back the depth off. But if you're looking for something that just is like adding some kind of mojo and intrigue, I would say the Destroyer is a great option. I tend to set it to where it's just shy of noticeable. Kind of like setting an amp for edge of breakup, setting the sample rate and bit depth to where you can feel it more than you can hear it. Bringing the bit depth down with the full sample rate, down to about maybe 12. Audio experts, you might be able to explain to me why this feels the way it does, but it feels like almost like a warm compressor kind of blanketing your tone. So I often have the Destroyer mode on when I just need a little bit more from my clean tone. Sounds great. So this, I guess, is less a sound you maybe didn't know, but one I would really encourage you to revisit if you haven't in some time, because the amount of kind of variability it has, pretty incredible, but as just a clean tone enhancer, really cool. Finally, let's talk about the phaser. One of my favorite ambient modulation modes is phaser, and there are so many incredible options in the Mobius that I feel like that phaser library thing is immense value, but I want to show you how I'm using it most often. Going for kind of the most subtle phasing that I can find. Very slow rate, and there are a couple of wave shapes to choose from, but let's put together kind of a great phasing sound for ambient music. We're going to put this in 8 stage, with the region about halfway up, and the wave shape, we're going to keep it sine just to keep it pretty organic for the moment. One thing that I love about what the Mobius offers is it allows us to kind of create a bit of separation between each side using the spread, and so without it, kind of up and down, your standard slightly claustrophobic phaser sound, but then the moment you start to kind of create a little bit of separation, kind of starts to come alive a little bit more. If we create a little bit more regeneration, it starts to kind of create that fun, fluttery sound. Now if we add a reverb, and if we back off the depth a little bit, without it. So really when you start kind of layering in ambient effects, it almost kind of fades to the background. It's definitely something that I think thrives in really dirty, driven kind of scenarios. But I really love that like kind of low, slow growl. If we back off the regen even more, you can tell it's there when it's totally exposed, but putting the reverb back on, adds that movement and kind of sway. But it's not vibrato. It's not something that's like changing your pitch. Definitely fuller chords kind of make it a little bit more pronounced. But I just think it adds this really pleasant kind of warmth and articulation that I think is really pretty. Those are 5 sounds that I think are really worth talking about in the Mobius. I'm curious how many of them you've used yourself, how many of them are new. And if this is something that you're still rocking in 2024, or if you're using something else for your modulation needs. But thanks for watching.